know what, it's kind of cold here. Indonesia was a lot warmer. So let's move to California. And here I am in elementary school. I'm like, California, where's that? I didn't know where California was. They told me, oh, that's where the rest of the family is at the moment. They all live on the West Coast. So I was like, oh, okay. And then I'm like, oh, where are the rest of the family from? And they're like, oh, they're from Asia. So I went to California thinking I moved to Asia. And it was just on the West Coast. I thought the West Coast of the United States was Asia. So I stayed there. I went to school there. But as you may know, you form childhood friends young. And I was basically uprooted from New York and transplanted to California/Asia. And everyone had their friends already. I went to elementary school. It was hard to form really tight childhood friends. Because, you know, I was a stranger. Okay? And I was a little stranger because I didn't know who these people were. And I didn't really fit in. And to further complicate things, my grandfather died upstate. 70 years old, delivering newspapers. He was never idle, so he kind of slipped on a patch of ice, had a heart attack, died. And then our parents decided, you know, ice isn't a really good thing. They hate the snow. My grandmother, on the other hand, doesn't speak a shred of English. And my parents never really spoke Chinese at home. So whenever I was with my grandmother in California, I would have to mime my way across. And she'd make fun of me and just tap my head and say things that I didn't understand. So California was a strange place for me. I had moved to San Jose. There was a large population there, primarily Vietnamese, Chinese people, too. There were a few Indonesians, but at the same time, I didn't really interact with them. There weren't too many. I was kind of kept to myself. You know, I started reading books. I liked reading the Hardy Boys back then, the Red Ball series. I remember sitting down, reading Pearls of Lutra, part of the Red Ball series, for 8 hours straight. So, middle school, elementary school, I just spent time reading. Middle school, people started warming up in general. Middle school, you got to meet more people, you know, because people start getting schooled up, start getting moved around, how I felt, how I was. There were all sorts of different people, even though the majority was a mix of Asian, Southeast Asian, Caucasian descent. I started to make friends, and I remember my best friend, surprisingly, was of Chinese descent. But like myself, he was a little bit removed as well. He was from southern China. He moved to New Zealand, Hong Kong, New Zealand, then found his way to the US. But unlike me, he spent his life traveling, and he wasn't the product of a travel. I met another guy who was from Hong Kong as well, moved around a bit. I was sympathetic with him because he was also like me in a sense, but not really. He was kind of like an annoying, awkward outcast, and I felt like that at times because who was I? I was an intruder. So, you know, I got to know him. I found him pretty annoying at first, and as I started to get to know him, I found out he was just annoying all around. He was great company though, and we started playing, you know, we had a common interest. We started playing video games online. You know, everything was good. But I didn't feel like, I finally made some good friends, but I didn't feel like they were still representative in China. I was still trying to reconnect with China in general, because, you know, being detached. However, middle school didn't come without conflict. Even though I made friends, there were like random nationalities, like a Korean boy who always gave me trouble during my first year of middle school. He was part of elementary school, and at one point we both liked the same girl. He kept quiet. He made a fool of himself. I still think he makes a fool of himself. That's my bias, though. And we spent many weeks of detention together because we always fought during class. Not a great idea. I There was a Japanese boy who simply did not like me. It appeared to him that I was intruding on his friendships, because moving from elementary school to middle school, you start to make new friends. He didn't like me moving in, because I still felt like an intruder. Here I was, from New York. I had a funny accent. I don't even know if I have an accent. I thought everybody else had an accent. He would point out my differences and tell me I was a loser. Of course I got angry, but it's middle school. But they followed me through high school, so that's high school too. But it felt like there was no lateral move to being accepted. It was like I was being rejected on all fronts. And where did I belong? Both of these situations, I felt like I was being wrong for the wrong reasons, in particular. But sure, the first one could be explained as just young school and fighting. But the second one was unexplainable. I felt like I was being picked out because I was different. But just in general. Within the family, life went on as normal. Parents yelled, pushed, tried to make you strive for academic superiority. My mother was an accountant. She taught me my multiplication tables right after first grade. It was horrible. Math didn't stop there. And going on to high school, I got a dog. He would always listen to me and never argue back. Dog. He smelled bad and he was my friend. My adventures don't stop there. Every once in a while, my parents felt like, oh, you know what? Let's have a random bout of reconnection. Let's travel to Asia during middle school. Let's go to China. My father, he still kept in contact with people in southern China. They were still family, except I never met them, ever. I've never even heard of them. It was just suddenly, oh, here you go, there's a whole village of people you're related to. And I'm like, okay. So we went over to China, and yeah, I remember meeting so many people, I don't even know how they're related to me. It's just taken for granted. You're related to them. So I'm like, okay. I remember meeting my great uncle. He thought it would be very funny to give me a full bowl of fruit punch. It wasn't fruit punch, it was red wine. So after I was a little tipsy, he told me, you see that little baby buffalo over there? Why don't you go pet it? I went over to go pet it. The mother got really mad and started chasing after me. 6th grade. Can't forget 6th grade. Anyways, let me tell you something. When they tell you that your life flashes right before your eyes, that happens when you go through things like get in a car crash or fall off a ladder. It's just, those small moments where everything happens just during the time something bad is happening to you. Well, the mother cow did not chase me for 1 second. She chased me for a full minute. So my whole life was dragged out.